Welcome, everybody, to Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, the author of Writing That Gets Noticed, Find Your Voice, Become a Better Storyteller, Get Published, and it is now a course at NYU and an elective towards the journalism certificate. Every week, I speak with novelists, with authors, with writers of every niche to talk about their tips, their tricks, their strategies, and how the sauce is made, including creative advice. I'll talk about essays and articles and share my own experience from 3 decades of publishing. So join me every week and grow your business and build your craft with Freelance Writing Direct. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. And follow along on Substack, where I share special clips for subscribers only at estelleserasmus.substack.com. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus. I've had 3 decades in publishing on both sides of the publishing wall, and I'm the author of Writing That Gets Noticed, now a course at NYU. And I am so happy to have Abigail Thomas with us today. Oh, my goodness. So there's a lot to talk about. And I have her book here for those who are watching on YouTube. And Abigail Thomas, I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. She has 4 children, 12 grandchildren, 2 great-grandchildren, 11 books, and a high school education. She was asked to leave Bryn Mawr freshman year when she told the dean she was pregnant, and she never went back. She has always wanted to be a writer, but for a long time, the closest she came was bopping around her kitchen to Paperback Writer by the Beatles. When she was 48, after an interesting adventure when she got home, she left her ego outside and began to write a story. It didn't work, but instead of crumbling it up, saying, "Who do you think you are?" sat in a different chair and another. And at the end of the afternoon, she had written a story. It was published in the Columbia Journal of Poetry and Prose. She had learned you have to keep at it. Writing is work of the best kind. She has written 2 short story collections, 1 novel, and 4 works of nonfiction, including the memoir Safekeeping, A 3-Dog Life, What Comes Next and How to Like It, and a book about writing, Thinking About Memoir. Still Life at 80. The next interesting thing is her latest memoir and the focus of today's program. So welcome, Abigail.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
It's so great to have you. And I have so many questions for you. So I devoured your book, Still Life at 80, and I love the double meaning in the title.
Thank you.
Now, did you come up with that title? That's a
I
great
did.
title.
Yeah. At first I thought still life, but then there's only one meaning when it's just still life. But still life at 80 had double meaning. And that was what I wanted to.
Yeah, because you're 80. Are you 81 now? I don't know. What are you still 80?
I'm 82.
82. Okay, so you're 82.
And feel very superior.
And you had said like 81 is not as dramatic. So you're not going to make a big deal about it. I guess you can make a big deal about 81. And 82 is
90 would be the next one. Or 99. No, I don't want to be that here that long. There isn't going to be a year.
So there is so much to talk about. So I love the title because I love the play on words. And I used to be a magazine editor-in-chief, and we'd come up with the cover lines. And, this is just so evocative. And plus, you crafted your book so that your last chapter talked about still life and the actual form of still life, as in a painting of apples or fruit or something like that. And you talked about what you thought was maybe the greatest opening to a book that was never published, about all the fishies. That was
long ago in the deep, deep part of the Atlantic Ocean, there lived and was born the most beautiful fishies of them all. I love outsider art, but I've always wondered about, is there such a thing as outsider writing, and that was it. That
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 was
that particular paragraph. Unfortunately, the book wasn't as good as that, but boy, that was good. Thank you.
that opened it into the world. It took
Yeah,
you to a different world. That's really what happened there. I love it.
just love it.
So, I mean, you put so much attention into your book, right? And this was written during the pandemic. I mean, probably the early days of COVID, which it kind of brought me back to that. And here you were, you couldn't go out, you couldn't drive at night. I don't drive at night either by choice. And you decided your attention was pulled by whatever was around you.
Yeah.
And in your case, it was the little brown ant, maybe scurrying to find his place or missing an anthole. And you worried, are you lonely, ant? You know, you had these ruminations of your mind, but it was also the attention that a writer pays to life.
Yeah. And there's always something to pay attention to, which is why it's so nice to be a writer. There's always something that you're curious about, and you can't
Yes.
figure out the answer, but you can guess at it.
You have a curious mind. And so the curious mind wasn't going to be in inaction during the pandemic. It was going to take whatever material, like life. I think Nora Ephron said everything is material.
Oh,
So,
everything's material. Yeah.
so that was everything is copy. I think that's what she said. It was in a, consumery way, but it's the same idea. It's like that wasp. And there was even a point where you were kind of nurturing to,
Yeah, that single-winged wasp. I was so worried about him.
you were.
I couldn't fix him. There was nothing I could do except think about what he must be thinking about.
And
Yeah.
pre-pandemic, would that have crossed your consciousness? Would you have been looking at the wasp, looking at the stink bug, which you say you like? I hate
Oh, I
them.
love
Like,
stink. I don't know whether I would have or not, but I think I would have. The one winged wasp on the cuff of my sleeve, I think I would have paid attention to that because
okay.
it's so sad. And it wasn't even irritated. I mean, it was just I didn't know what it was doing, thinking about. It was just very absorbing.
You had this paying attention, but you also had something which is really interesting to me. You talked about, I guess, seeing a young girl, maybe with her
Thank God
life
that
ahead
isn't
of
me.
her. And
Thank
you
God.
said, I'm glad that's not me.
Oh God, thank God. Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Age is so much easier than being young. It is so much easier. First of all, your own best company is yourself. You don't worry about what you're missing. Not that I'm sure I ever did. You no longer ask questions like this, which I did ask. Do these earrings make me look fat? You don't care what you're wearing. You don't care who's looking. Nobody's looking, which means you can look and stare at anything you want. It's just so much simpler. All this stuff that mattered when you were young is just gone. And now you find out who the other person you were without somebody who whistled at you walking down the street. Who are you? Who are you? And it's just very interesting. And being a writer, I'm so grateful I'm a writer because there's just so much you can figure out. Because when you're writing a memoir, you're really figuring out how you got here from there. And you figure out which is the here and which was the there. And when you're this old, of course, I've written a couple of books about that. It's so freeing. It's really freeing. And whatever you worried about when you were in your 30s and 40s, maybe even your 50s, you just don't give a shit about anymore. It's just a perfect age, except for when you need your hip replaced, which is a drag, because there's nothing more boring than physical therapy. And I have to have my hip replaced. There's always something interesting to think about. I don't know. I like this age. I wouldn't be 10 minutes younger. I'm enjoying old age.
So when I read the things that you did when you were younger, you were a bit of a badass. I mean, you had,
I had a good time.
you had a good time, right? You talked about your 20s and going somewhere and finding someone to spend the night with. And it was a different time. As you said, it was a more innocent.
It was a more innocent time. At least for me, it was a more innocent time. The innocence and the opportunity was also scary because you really could do any goddamn thing you wanted to. Because your parents were babysitting for your kids, because you left your first husband. You could go anywhere and just tell them you'd gone off to see the social worker, and they believed you. Or I guess they believe anyway. Yeah, you could do pretty much what you wanted.
So let me ask you this. Most people who are getting, I hate the word, I know you don't mind the word older, you don't like the word senior. I
Oh,
don't like the word old because I just feel like I don't like the preconceived notions on it, but I understand about elder, senior, elder statesperson, all that. A lot of people feel invisible.
that's wonderful. It's a superpower.
Oh,
Have you
okay. People
always
are
known?
not saying that they think that it's a superpower, though. They feel overlooked. And being a writer, you will never be overlooked because you know how to get your words noticed,
Well,
right?
no, yes, I'm very lucky that some people like my writing, but I'm just very lucky because it's so much fun and it's so scary, and you have to go places you don't want to go and reveal things about yourself you don't want to reveal. But once you've done it, the darkness has no power anymore. You have to drag them out of the dark and hold them up, and you realize that they're finite and they have edges, and after a while you learn to forgive yourself.
So would you say at this point in your life, you have no regrets or
No, I have regrets, but regret is what guilt turns into when it grows up. Something starts as guilt and it teaches you something when you're young, but it sort of paralyzes you if you keep it up. And when it grows up, or when you do, it turns into regret. And you can do something with regret. You can make amends. You can start a conversation about what you wish you hadn't done, or you can just listen and you don't try to fix anybody. It's a regret is a basic part of human nature, and it sort of rounds out your life. This is what I regret doing, but I've done my best to at least help when I can. And guilt is just gone. It's just gone.
as you're speaking, I'm thinking of the Julie Louis-Dreyfus podcast, Wise Like Me, where
Mm.
she talks to women 70, 80, old. She had Carol Burnett. You would be great on that podcast because you have so much to share about life experience that people maybe they don't get to that point to understand. Maybe they don't have the capacity, the mental capacity at a certain point.
A whole nother issue.
Yes.
That I would dread. I mean, but so far, I mean, I can't remember yesterday.
Right.
All of today is not going to make it into tomorrow. Things are going to get left behind. But I've accepted that because I am now living in the moment.
I love that you are living in the moment. The present is all we have, and that's the
All we
gift.
have. That's all we have. And it's right here. And it's interesting.
Do you know it reminds me of the song from Pippin. I think it's called Time to Start Living. Do you know Pippin?
No, but I know that when you're young, you push everything ahead like the good silver. You don't use it, you wait for a special occasion. When you're this age, you do exactly what you've always wanted to do. And there's nothing left for the future because there's no future. There's only this. Here we are.
What's the message that you wanted to share in your book besides this moment in time in your life, in
I
the
think
world?
just that I just wanted to say, don't fear old age because
Don't.
it's really a whole lot easier than youth. And you get to look back on youth. And even if you're not a writer, if you do start writing about what you remember and go to all the hard parts as well, I mean, just for yourself, like a diary, it's what you gain is some kind of clarity. And clarity is comfort. It just is. And that's,
Clarity is comfort. I love that.
we all used to keep diaries, and now they're called journals, which I'm horrified by the word, by the verb to journal. Because it sounds like something where you're trying to perfect every sentence before it's time and
Yeah.
be published posthumously and all that. But a diary, I mean, my diaries were full of, I love him so much. And sugar, eggs, flour, butter, get it today for the cake. Just everything went in. And that's what writing memoir ought to be, or just writing about your life. I just recommend everybody write about their life.
Yeah. I,
Because
I, I love what you write in the beginning of the book. You refer to the concept of time travel.
yes, yeah,
And so I just want to, I know you're 82 now, but here's what you said. Pushing 80, the future is behind me. The past is unpredictable. I'm living in the ever-shifting constancy of now. Sometimes the present is interrupted by a memory so vivid that I am in two places at once, an inexpensive, unpatented, readily available form of time travel. These are the moments in which past and present are fused. I like to imagine them as little paperweights holding my life together before it all blows away. Wow. Powerful stuff.
be in two places at once, right? I mean, you're not old yet, but aren't there moments when you're simply back in 1958 or 78 and you're remembering something, somebody you went out with or a concert you went to, and for just a little while, that's where you are.
I get that through music.
Yes,
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 that kind
you
of could
avoid
bring
it.
me to tears. Then I remember a time in high school or my first concert going to see the Eagles,
Yeah, oh, yes, the Eagles. Oh, I
or
love
Fleetwood Mac, which I'm obsessed with.
I really love the band. The band is my favorite group, which is why I moved to Woodstock when I moved up here, just because they had walked on these streets.
I love the word gravitas.
Yes,
It's just such a great word. And you use it on page 9, waiting for gravitas. And you said 80 has gravitas. Do you mean that like people are looking at you and going, wow, she's lived a life, a
I don't
career?
know if people are looking at me like that, but that's how I feel.
That's how
There's
you,
not much I wish I had done that I didn't do. I did a
right.
lot of running around. I had children, I have grandchildren.
Yeah.
I failed at things because I think making mistakes is the way you really learn something, especially with writing. The nice thing about writing is nothing is wasted. You can write 500 pages that you throw out just to get to the first sentence of what you're really going to write. So it's always an adventure. I
Yes.
can't recommend it highly enough for people who have not quite enough to do or aren't in.
Has your writing process changed as you've gotten older? Like, is it getting, some people have told me, oh, Estelle, it used to take me forever to write something, and now it's a much faster process. Is it faster for you? Is it slower? I know you don't remember something, earlier in the day, but that
Depends,
doesn't have to do with long-term
it
memory.
depends on what I'm writing about. When I wrote Safekeeping, that was just like popcorn flying out of me. I had no idea what I was doing. Three Dog Life, that book I wrote as it was happening, or I would not have survived it. I had a notebook with me everywhere I went and everywhere he was. And I wrote down things he said and things I thought. I mean, that was written as it was happening. Safekeeping just came flying out of me until at some point I realized I was writing something, but I wasn't sure what it was.
Mhm.
And What Comes Next and How to Like It, I wrote because my best friend had asked me to. We'd been close for a long, long time and something
Yeah.
happened. And I got a lot of it written, but I couldn't figure out how to begin it. How do I? And I wrote him back. I said, listen, why did we become friends so quickly? You tell me, I can't do this. So I wrote back 2 sentences. She was funny. So was I. And And at one point during that book, my daughter was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer, which is a really terrifying diagnosis. It's defined as likely to come back. Not even anyway, I couldn't write about it. And I had half the book written, and I needed to put this in because Chuck was extremely helpful during this time. And I needed a side door. And I just couldn't go through the front door and write about it. But the dog took one of her wigs and ran out the door with it. And that was my side door.
The dog gave you the entree point.
Yeah.
The dog's actions, just using that. That's brilliant.
Just using that. And I had a way in. And often there's something you want to write about, but it's too looming and imposing. And you have to find the side door. You have to find the way in.
Talk more to me about that. That's really interesting. So can you use anything around you as the side door?
I was giving a workshop at Tin House a million years ago, and I gave the assignment to the class, write 2 pages of a time when you were inappropriately dressed for the occasion. And my version of that was that I'd gone to a party in the East Village in the late 60s, and everybody was on the bed with no clothes on. And I didn't want to take my dress off because I looked good in it. Anyway, there was a woman there whose husband had been helping, not even a friend, but somebody else, load his car up with stuff. And just because he was a good guy. And the car moved and something fell on him and hit his head. And by the time they got to the hospital, he was pronounced brain dead. So there she was on the roof of the hospital, trying to decide whether to take him off life support. She was wearing flip-flops, shorts, and a t-shirt, and she thought to herself, these are the wrong clothes to be wearing when you make this kind of decision. And she'd never written about it before, but it was a side door. So I know it was extremely moving. It was 26 years earlier that this had happened. And this was what made it possible for her to write about it.
So the side door is never as heavy as the thing
Yeah.
it's now opening up onto.
Right.
That's brilliant.
It gets you in. That's why I give assignments, because a lot of them strike a chord. You know, it's just, yeah. Well,
Can it be dialogue also?
It could be anything that makes you realize, oh, I can start there. I can start right there. You could write down what somebody has just said, if it's funny or irritating, and then that's where you start. You just have to keep your ears open. That's all. I mean, she really had never written about it ever. And then there was this inappropriately dressed for the occasion. And the occasion was, shall I take him off life support?
I mean, I love side door because I read memoir that's like some, not your caliber, but like more amateurish. And it's always like, I had a flashback, you know, or like I flashed back to that moment. And it's like, boom, you're in the heavy thing.
Yeah.
There's no side door. It's like, you know, a freight train dropping you into the story.
Yeah. Finding your way in to something that's too hard to write about directly. And they're all over the place. You just have to keep your ears open, I think. Although, you know, you can get stuck for a while.
Yeah.
You
use metaphor so beautifully throughout. I mean, I just wrote some of the notes. You write about the Windex and the fly's fatal carnival. I love this.
Yeah.
The fly struggle, you said. The fly struggle, but I persevere. And after what seems like forever, wings held tight against their bodies, the flies are sliding down the glass on streams of the liquid like a fatal carnival ride. That is.
Well, it made me feel a little better about what I had just done. I only kill flies. I don't kill anything else.
And then you talk about your dignified former dog, Cooper, and say when he died, he slipped away on his own just as quietly as if he had tiptoed out of the room.
Yeah.
And I imagine this stately, courtly gentleman just like backing out. And I was just like, oh, it's so touching. And I loved something else that you wrote. I mean, I love so much what you write, but you made me think of that time in the pandemic when, we didn't know what the day would take. We didn't know what would happen. And you would do your list for your friend to go shopping for you. But you said you had the rug and you put your foot on it as like a gas pedal to get to
Pushing.
the day when everything changes.
I know, you're really, pedal to the metal. That's what it felt like. Didn't work.
And you talk about dread, and I never really had that feeling until the pandemic. And then I struggled with breath. Like I could not catch my breath. I started having breathing panic attacks. And plus,
Yeah.
the whole concern was something could affect your breathing. So it was just doubly horrible. And you really mentioned that looming feeling of dread then.
I couldn't put a name to it, anxiety I can name, fear I can name. I couldn't put a face on it, which made it much worse. Not even death rang a bell when I had these feelings of dread. But when I was married to my second husband, I always forget that I had a first one. I would remember, and it was a very unhappy time. And I would remember waking up in the morning and looking out the window, and for a second I was fine, and then like a chain fence coming down, I was filled with dread. I don't think it works for what this dread was, but I think often dread is your signal that something has to change, because often it is anger that you're not expressing. But it didn't work for me this time. I was just filled with dread. And
Well, was it because of your age
I
and the
don't know. I really don't know. It came out of nowhere. It came out of, I've no idea. If I could have put a name to it, I could have made it go away, but I couldn't put a name to it. And I tried. Wasn't.
Yeah. You refer, anytime you kind of have a dilemma about a word or the meaning, you would go to your trusty dictionary.
Everybody has something.
Do you still do that? Is that
Oh,
still your,
oh
is it
my
right there?
God. Yeah, it's right here. I have two of them. I have one in the other room. This
Oh,
will tell you about the history of the species very often. Sometimes nothing, but when it does, it can change. I mean, the word futility came from an ancient word that meant simply a leaky vessel. Now, how can you, what, that's a poem already. But the word happy used to mean simply luck, good or bad. And we have turned it into something we can buy, wear, wash. I mean, it's just, we go shopping. It didn't have that meaning back then. It wasn't something we could pursue. It would drift in through the open window and you suddenly feel good, or, but we've made things so material now. I mean, everything that should be just nothing more than a breeze is something you can hold in your hand and show other people you bought this, or I don't, it's just, but
no,
it's a very interesting book because you get to the roots.
you talk about editing and honing things down. And, even if you start with hundreds and hundreds of words, you're going to cut out what is essential because you write in a spare way, but it also conveys a lot of information in the way you do it.
What the way I remember my life is, I remember moments, and
Okay.
I mean sometimes I write longer, but mostly I write pretty short. And to get a moment down right, it doesn't need furniture or jewelry or the smell of cookies. It just needs that particular moment and nothing extra. So you get in and you get out. You've done it to your satisfaction and you leave it.
So when you're leaving it, like let's say you're saying, okay, I need to look and see what I can cut. Do you, people have different processes. Some people take a highlighter and like anything that looks extraneous, they get rid of it. or the sensory language, they're going and they're saying, oh, here I said something, and maybe I can explain how it tasted or smelled or something like that. Do you do anything like that, or is it just all intrinsic at this point?
A lot of it is what I'm most interested in is the rhythm of what I've written. And I do two things. Sometimes I print it out in a font different from the one in which I wrote it, so it looks like somebody else wrote it, so you can be ruthless. And sometimes I read it out loud, and when your voice goes dead, there's either something hiding behind that sentence or it's just boring. And the best is when something is hiding behind that sentence and you have to go back and look at it. But it's a lot of it is just the rhythm of what I've written and the stuff in there that isn't part of that moment, or the stuff that's explaining the moment, because I don't want to explain it. I just want to present it as clearly and simply as I can.
I think you really enjoy it. You really enjoy the whole process. There are some writers that are like, I have to, but you enjoy it, every aspect.
I don't know how you cannot love it. I don't understand people who say it's just agony. It's thrilling. It's thrilling. What you discover about yourself, what you remember. And I don't know, I'd love to do it. Yes, it's hard. And there was something I was writing that took weeks to get right, but it was just interesting to see what do I leave out? What do I leave out? And what is important? And I took out sentences I loved and things. And that's just an interesting process.
So when you take out the sentences you love, do you put them in another file? Do you just you hold them, print them out, or
I make them go away.
you make them go away? Okay, so you kill your darlings, right?
Well, I just put them away. They're not always my darlings either, but they're just something extra that was just for me. And if it was just for me, it goes,
Is there something that you are maybe still clamoring to write about or thinking about writing about?
Right now, I'm trying to write about my failure to be able to read a book from cover to cover. I can read essays, I can read poems, but I pick up a book and no matter how good it is, I get 2 sentences down and then I look at all those words and I just can't do it. And I don't know whether I was thinking about it a lot today. I type on a computer now because my handwriting, I can't read my handwriting. And if you're writing on a computer, you can hop off to Facebook if you want to, or you can see if you have any mail if you're sort of stuck. And I'm not playing video games, but maybe that hopping around is what makes it hard for me to read anything long, although I can focus on what I'm writing for days. I don't know. I'm just exploring it. It isn't something I particularly miss because I have the things I do read, which are short. I mean, a poem that you don't have to turn the page.
What's your favorite poem? Do you have a favorite?
Well, right now, my favorite poem used to be by George Herbert called Love Bade Me Welcome. But my favorite poem right now is a William Carlos Williams poem called The Act. And it's about this long, 5 pages long. And it's about how beautiful the roses are in the rain. And his wife is going to cut them. Oh, don't cut them. They look so beautiful there. And then she says, I think the last lines are, we were all beautiful once. And she cut them and gave them to me in my hand, which is just fucking great. They're
wow,
just wonderful.
And you're also on social media.
I am. I'm on Facebook. Not as much as I was, but I'm on Facebook.
What do you like about social media? Because it's another view into a world, isn't it?
It's another view into a world. And I used to spend more time on it. And now mostly what I do is if I've had something that I've been trying to work on and I hope it is good, I stick it up on Facebook and see if anybody likes it. And that's very helpful.
You're crowdsourcing.
I am. Oh,
yeah, that's what you're doing. That's brilliant.
Well, it's not brilliant, but it's a way of some other way of getting a bunch of people who may or may not like what I wrote. And if they like what I wrote, I feel good. And I mean, it's really just very vanity.
It's that external validation, but don't all us writers on some level want
Need it?
that?
Oh, God, yes. Yeah, because you don't know. Well, you know you like it, but you don't know until other people like it. And you don't even know them really, because that's basically what I do. And then I hear about something, and then I check out what they're doing and write them something. Or, I used to be on it all the time. And now it's like I put up something yesterday because I'd gone to Northwestern when I was much younger to talk about memoir. And a teacher, a young man, came into the room and he said, "My life has not been interesting at all. It's been very boring. Can I make it up? If I write memoir, can I stick things in that are more interesting than my life?" And I said, "No, no, you can't. But you might find it interesting to write a book about who you wish you'd been and what you wish you'd done, alternating with what your life was like." And I think of that because my son-in-law wished he grew up on the East Side, very rich, very blah, blah. And he wished he'd been a jewel thief. And I thought, if you write about being a jewel thief, alternating with the Upper East Side, snobby life that he hated, that'd
Right.
make a really interesting memoir.
That
So I put that up as like a big assignment, and a lot of people were interested in that. It was just such a funny thought and such an interesting idea.
Do you have some other like kind of writing tips that you share with your students?
I give assignments. I say, write 2 pages, begins with a sentence, "This is a lie I've told before," and see what happens. Or write 2 pages, the second sentence of which is, "It's not funny." That's the only thing I know how to do, except keep an eye out for the way into something that is looming too large for you to walk through the front door. And there will be something, and it will be otherwise meaningless, except to you, you know. And doesn't have to be 2 pages of when you were inappropriately dressed for the occasion. It can be somebody saying something that reminds you of something, and then you do it that way. There is no way, no method. Just keep your ears open. Or you can just say, "I can't write about this," and you can whine, "I hate this. There's nothing, I don't know how to do this." And then you wind up doing it. That is a way to do it, because I didn't know how to start this book, What Comes Next, and how to like it. So I began to say, "I don't want to do this. I don't know what to say. I don't know where to begin." And then I wound up writing about what I was doing instead of writing, which was painting. And then that got me in. So whining is a big help to a writer. And there's a reason why all children are born knowing, "I don't want to." Do that for a while until you get to a point where
Wow.
this is the reason why I can't do it. Or this is what I'm doing instead of writing the beginning, and that will be good enough.
Do you still play with the clay?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I have a very good time with it.
What's the face lately that you created with
So
the
I
clay?
made it a beautiful Chinese man, and then I made it an angry man who started out very boring, but then I made him angry. The clay bosses you around. You don't have any say in what you're going to. If it wants you to make something and you don't make it, you don't get to make anything. And often when you look in your hand, you can see a beak or a wing or a nose or something. And then it's your job to find the rest of them. And that's what you make.
It's
It's
that
really,
mystical creative process through the clay, right?
well, the
Because
clay is the boss of you. That's all I can say. I can't boss the clay around. If it won't let me do this, I have to find out what it does want me to make. And then if I do what it wants, then I can, the next time I try with another piece of clay, I can do what I want.
isn't writing like that too sometimes though, or not always?
You can't boss the writing around. You can't force it. You can't force yourself to write something that isn't true if you're writing memoir. Who would you be fooling? Yourself? No. All I know about writing is, I mean, one of the things I know about writing is you can't boss it around. You have to let it will come, but it sometimes takes a while to get the start.
To do the whining to get
And
it.
yes, and also to figure out something that you didn't know you were trying to figure out. That's what the fun is. Oh, that's what I'm writing about after 10 pages of dribble.
Yeah.
But it's never wasted, that's the other nice thing.
Nothing is ever wasted.
Nothing is ever wasted because you have to go through that to get to where you didn't know you wanted to go. And so it's an adventure every time. It's, don't you think?
Yes, I definitely do. So many people have interviewed you. Is there a question that nobody has asked you yet that you want to be asked? And I'm happy to ask it of you, or you can answer it.
I've never thought about that. I'm sure there's a question nobody's asked me, but I can't imagine. I don't know.
Related to writing or the creative process or
Sometimes as a writer, and especially as a writer of memoir, there's a ruthlessness that goes with it. But if the ruthlessness is not for revenge, but for clarity, you need to put it in. But before I published Safekeeping, there was a piece in it where my husband, Rich, and I were driving to see my daughter graduate. And my second husband was sick and he was in the back seat all wrapped up in cloth. And the three of us had done a lot of things together because Quinn was sick. And we passed an unlikely place for a restaurant. Maybe it was the Palisades Parkway, I can't remember. And Rich said, "That's a funny place for a restaurant." But as it happened, it was where Quinn and I had our wedding dinner. And I said, "I ate there once." And from the back seat, Quinn said, "So did I." And it hurt Rich. He said the only thing that bothered him was that because he hadn't known. But I would have put it in there anyway.
you had to put it in, and you felt you had to be ruthless by including it in a way.
Oh, yeah. And yeah. I mean, it was ruthless. Well, I didn't realize how ruthless it was till Rich said it had hurt him, but I would have put it in anyway because it belonged there. And it wasn't meant to hurt him, and it wasn't it was just something that needed to be there because it was such a moment.
Yeah.
I ate there once, so did I.
People write memoir and they have in their minds, they want to get the people who treated them badly.
Then they should be writing fiction because revenge is a lousy motive for writing memoir. You never want to be casting yourself as a victim, and you never want to be casting yourself as a saint. When Dorothy Allingham wrote Bastard Out of Carolina, did you ever read that?
I haven't, but I've heard.
It's an extraordinary. It's a novel.
Somebody else told me about it yesterday, literally yesterday.
It's a wonderful, wonderful book. She was badly, badly abused by any number of people when she was growing up. Had she written that as memoir, she would have cast herself as a victim. There was no other way to do it, but writing it as a novel freed her. And she's triumphant at the end, but it had to be written as fiction. There's no way she could have written about that childhood in a way. Well, I understand why she wrote it as fiction. That's all. I can't figure it out. If you want revenge, that's much better done in fiction. And if you're revealing something that somebody else might not like, but it's for clarity, and without it, you're making a three-legged table, it has to go in. A Three-Dog Life, which is about Rich's horrible traumatic brain injury. He has 3 kids. 2 of them were not helpful. And instead of writing about them, I just left them out completely. As though he had one daughter whom I really loved. And that was my revenge. They're not even mentioned in the book as his children. And that made me happy. But I couldn't have, I mean, what's the point?
Right.
What's the point? It's
Yeah.
not.
The author has a lot of control in a memoir, but everything has to serve, I guess, the story and not be about getting even or
No,
portraying yourself as a saint or a,
no. It was really, really written for clarity because it was so confusing.
yeah.
And some of the things he said were like the Delphic Oracle. I remember he said, the goat's mouth is full of stones. And I just wrote that down as just what a ravishing sentence. And I have no idea where that came from. And then there were moments of absolute perfect clarity. And I wrote them down too. He said, describing what his life was like, he said, pretend you're walking down the street with your friend and you're looking in windows, and right behind you is a man with a great big paint roller. And everywhere he's been, he's covering up with white paint so that you don't remember even your friend, you don't even remember his name. And that was such a perfect way of having lost your memory and your capability. And also, it was so interesting because I think when you've had that kind of injury, some other channel opens. Because I remember being in Mexico, and Rich was in the rehab center, and I was staring at the tiles on the Mexican, beautiful tiles on the Mexican kitchen, staring, 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 and trying to think how to get in touch with him. And I said, "What did you do today?" And he said, "We made some tiles," but they'd never made tiles.
Oh, wow. He was connected. He was
Oh,
energetically connected to you.
yeah. It was so interesting. And that happened time after time, time
That's,
after time.
that's fascinating. Time travel, right?
Time travel. Yeah.
Abby, thank you so much for speaking with me for Freelance Writing Direct. This was just such a great conversation.
Thank you for having me. It was really fun. I hope I made some sense. I don't
So,
always make.
so much sense.
Thank
I've loved speaking with
Oh,
you.
I had a lovely time too. Thank you so much.
Follow me at EstelleSErasmus.com on my website and on social media, which is Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Estelle S. Erasmus. And we're now on YouTube for Freelance Writing Direct. Follow along, and soon everyone will be reading what you're writing.